Hello, everybody. We are here for a new podcast. This time is with Bill Morris. Bill is the co-founder of Blue Star Recycles, which was founded in 2009. Bill will talk more about himself and the organization. I'm very glad Bill is here to contribute to new ideas on how we can have a social impact in a different way that goes beyond grants and can help people, but at the same time, her revenues that can be used to help more people. So, Bill, thank you so much for being here. Can you please introduce yourself and Blue Star Recycles? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Claudio. My name is Bill Morris. As you mentioned, I'm the co-founder of Blue Star Recyclers and based in Denver, Colorado. We were founded in 2009 and essentially as a social enterprise, providing electronics recycling as a means to create meaningful and competitive employment for people with autism and other developmental disabilities.
Fantastic. So, Bill, first question. Blue Star Recycles has been running for 16 years. Take me back in 2009. What were you trying to solve, and why recycling?
Sure. I wish I could say that it was an intellectually derived decision. It was a series of discoveries and a little serendipity that created it. But what happened was I was probably credited for being the first thing that was recycled at Blue Star. In the recession of 2008, I found myself out of work for the first time in about 30 years of employment. And I had been in the telecom sector and with Motorola and some other companies, and through a series of layoffs, just found myself out of work. So I had to go start looking at, and my industry wasn't hiring, and I took a job running a day program for people with developmental disabilities. Now, I had no experience and no qualifications for that job, but it paid so poorly that they were willing to just give me the job. I think if I had fogged the mirror, the old saying goes, they would have hired me. So here I am. I'm running a program with about 65 people with developmental disabilities, trying to figure out how to do it. And in the middle of the back part of the building was a small group of young men taking apart electronics. And over the course of maybe 3 to 4 months, I began to observe them more closely and more closely and realized they were very, very good at what they were doing. They were not being paid. They hadn't received any sort of technical training. They were really acting on intuition. The staff didn't really understand what they were doing. It was just a way to keep them busy. And I just was possessed with an idea that these folks really deserved an opportunity for meaningful and competitive employment. They had innate skills that were going to waste. So that was the genesis of the idea, Claudia, that really putting people to work that hadn't, none of these people, they were all in their mid-20s, coming to a government funded program every day. And they would have probably stayed there the rest of their lives as dependents on that program. Had a person like me with sort of a new set of eyes to look on it, I saw them as marketable employees instead of just people to receive services. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Sure.
Fascinating. So my follow-up question is, you built something that employs people with disability and generates a revenue by recycling electronics.
Right.
Most people would have instead to do this social good written a grant proposal. Why you didn't do that?
Well, I brought a little bit of a bias into this, which is I didn't really care for the nonprofit sector. I didn't have that bias prior to starting this work, but I noticed two things, Claudio. First of all, that nonprofits that I were at the time was working with, they were forming a dependence on the funding stream, the outside funding stream, and they were mutating their own mission and their own goals to follow the funding. And in those days, we were going through a little bit of like what we're going through right now. And so organizations were really losing their heart and soul just to get grants. So I didn't want to follow that model. And the other thing I noticed was again, just too much dependence on a source of funding that is controlled outside of your own ability to manage it. That scared me. So I wanted to start Blue Star with a model of generating its own income and be self-sufficient.
Very good. So walk me through how you generate these revenues. Who pays you for what, and how does this connect with the workforce mission with people with disabilities?
Well, it's a really interesting formula, and I don't know that we never knew this going in, but there's some common threads in the solution. One is that the workforce itself, 1 in 5 people in the United States have a diagnosed disability. So 20% of the adult population in the United States has a disability, yet less than 20% of that population is employed. Whatever jobs people with disabilities tend to have are tend to be funded by the government or have some dependence on government funding instead of just in the regular business sector. The other thing is if you look at electronics, when you're finished with your computer or an old laptop or printer or whatever, most Americans don't know what to do with those items, and they don't get recycled. At worst, they get thrown away. At best, they get put into a closet or a garage or a storage unit. And what happens is all of that material that is reusable can be processed and used in new manufacturing. We lose that material from the manufacturing stream, and so we have wasted resources. So if you think about this, the solution we came up with is a way to reduce the human potential and the resources that go into electronics. So what we did, to answer your question the long way around, is that we went to businesses that generate a lot of electronic waste when they do their IT refresh schedule and they buy new equipment. We got that equipment, we brought it back, we charged them a rate per pound to do that on the front end. And then we took apart all the electronics, and the constituent base materials have varying levels of value. Some have cost only, but some have value. And then we took that material to market and sold it. So between the upfront recycling fees and the downstream commodity value, we generated earned income that it took a while, but it ultimately covered our operating expenses.
Okay, so about revenues in social enterprises, uh, it's possible, there really is that there is a tension between revenues, profits, and the mission of the organization. I'm sure you experienced this in your organization. And I wanted to know how you reconcile those, like the mission of helping people with disabilities, and also the fact that you need a profit to continue to sustain your mission.
Right. And I just see it as being the most sustainable way of doing what we do. To have dependence on one major funding source or an outside funding source, to me, seems like very poor management of our mission. To have that mission funded by a number of stakeholders and constituents that, again, we have an outside customer who spends money with us. We have downstream processors who pay us money. So I've got multiple sources of income coming in that if one is reduced, the other one would take their place. And and we can go after grants and donations if we need to in a down market or as prudent operating reserves. But uh, that's really all we ever did with the outside funding, was to use it as a way of making sure that we kept going if we had a down market.
So I am sure that throughout these years, your uh, uh, enterprise experienced times of difficulties, or maybe times that even make you think about what you were doing. Uh, I would like to know how you went through these moments. Maybe you can, tell us an example, and what made you keep going at what you were doing.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is maybe one of the most important things that other social entrepreneurs need to hear, which is what happens when everything breaks, right? And how do you get through that? Because my experience is that it happens to everyone. For us, the first big setback was 2015, when the commodity markets tanked, when the value of the material was reduced to almost nothing, and at the same time, transportation costs to get that material into us and back out to market, the cost of fuel went up. So we were looking at, we went upside down very quickly, and we used up all of our prudent reserves, and we were staring at having to go under if we didn't do something very quickly. My board had encouraged me to raise our prices repeatedly, and I pushed back because we were already the most expensive provider in the market. We were charging more per pound. And I felt that if we charged more, we might lose market share. And this is why this is so important for other entrepreneurs to hear. We did a 40% price increase. I sent an email to all of our customers. At that time, we had about 800 business customers. And I told them why we had to make the increase and what was going on. And we did not lose one customer. And the reason is because we had communicated our mission, I think, well enough to where they responded back and said, we don't like the price increase, but we understand and we want you to keep going. So we're going to stick with you. So that was a huge lesson. So if you're a social entrepreneur, don't be afraid to make sure that you're charging everything the market can bear, because you're providing a solution that goes beyond just profit.
Great. Now, many NGOs nowadays, particularly international NGOs, nonprofit sector, they are experiencing a difficult time nowadays. So if the head of a mid-sized nonprofit called you tomorrow and said, we're too dependent on grants and we're scared because of the problems we see, what are the first couple of things you would tell them?
Well, first, I would say good for you for recognizing that the dependence that you have on grants is unhealthy. And second, it's really to take an inventory, step back and take an inventory. Um, I want to share something very quickly. One of the most profound things that happened to me was at a social enterprise world forum conference, where a man stood up on the stage and he pointed into the audience and asked people, "What's your mission? And what do you define as success?" And one person said, "We're a soup kitchen, and our definition of success would be to feed twice the amount of people next year as we do right now." And the next person said to double their budget. And he got very animated and said, "That's absolutely wrong. Your goal should be to become unnecessary. If you're a true nonprofit and you're doing something for the community, you should work on solving that problem and hopefully become unnecessary at some point." So what I share with other nonprofits is, let's create a way for you to reach that goal, not to double your budget, not to double your employees and the people served, but actually make a dent in the problem. So we would create that. Then the second thing is, let's go to the community and see what you're worth. And the way we do that Claudio, is we do what's called the social return on investment schedule, and it monetizes your impact. What it does is that it basically allows you to go to the community and say, every person that receives services from us generates this much in reduced taxpayer burden, in increased taxes to the community, whatever it is. And so you have a way of telling your community, because you exist, the community benefits. The problem is most nonprofits and social enterprises have a very mushy narrative and story. They don't measure their impact, so they go, yeah, we do really cool stuff and da 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 da. At Blue Star, we measured the pounds of material that we recycled, and we actually say for every pound of material recycled, we create 13 cents of reduced tax burden. So every time you recycle with Blue Star, you're actually triggering a positive impact. So I would encourage nonprofits to begin to measure their impact and monetize it, and be able to go to the community and say, because we're here, the community benefits. Now we're going to provide services that we're going to charge for, but because it creates positive impact, that won't cost, that'll actually pay the community. So you have to reframe your narrative to where you're adding value back to the community, not just doing cool stuff.
Very good. My last question. So you have been recognized by the White House, won social impact awards, and built something that lasted 16 years. What's the thing the social sector, nonprofit sector still gets wrong about the earned revenue models?
I just think it's a way of thinking that hopefully will change as more people with business acumen come into the sector. Think about this. Most nonprofit leaders I've met went to school and got their degree in running a nonprofit or something like that, and never spent time in the business sector, never gained an understanding of how business works. And the problem is that made them dependent when they started their organization to go after outside funding. So what I would say is the reason we get it wrong is that we think like dependents, right? And we need to stop thinking about dependence and think of it as small business people. In my experience, small businesses are the most powerful thing in the world. They're highly agile and effective, and they solve problems very quickly and very efficiently. And if we could get more social entrepreneurs thinking as small business people, and not as nonprofit leaders, then we'll change this. And so and I think we're getting there. And honestly, what we're going through right now, it really is difficult, and I would not want to go through it again, but I think it's going to force us to finally behave this way.
Great. Bill, thank you so much for the insights you provided during this conversation. And thank you so much for you have been doing for people with disabilities through your social enterprises.
Oh, thank you. I always say I have my job because of the people we employ, not the other way around, because the one thing I didn't share is that as a workforce, they outperform their counterparts, their neurotypical counterparts, almost 2 to 1. And because of that, we have an advantage over our competitors. So this is maybe the best kept secret in the world, that if you hire people with disabilities, they are not only capable, but they will make the difference.
Great. Bye, Bill.